Mars Surface Ops, this is Houston. We're go for data.
Copy, Houston. Base pedal temp good. Remote pedal actuator good. Probe primary and auxiliary transponders A-OK. Shunt voltage 3-0.
DSN uplink rate is now 61.101.
Copy. We'll see if we can better that for you. This is the probe's last pass through the squadron. We need all the data we can get.
Stand by. We're getting a low current level here. Voltage is down to 185.
Here's our rock, fellas. 119er.
Beautiful.
There it is again. There it is again. Voltage down to 113.
Can you repo the solar arrays?
Negative. MPC load is critical.
Mars Surface Ops, we're losing the signal. We're losing the signal.
Oh, great. Another rock for us to study. What did I tell you guys? This planet is dead. Since the dawn of humanity, we have gazed up into the heavens and been drawn to Mars with curiosity. Did life ever exist there?
But scientists think that Mars once may have been much more hospitable to life. Now they have found more evidence for that. In rock samples collected and examined by NASA's Mars exploration rover Opportunity, researchers have discovered evidence of an ancient wet environment that was milder and less acidic than previously believed. Scientists directed the Opportunity rover to a place on the rim of the Endeavour crater after data from NASA's reconnaissance orbiter suggested there may be clay minerals on the crater rim which form in the presence of water, and that turned out to be true.
When we drove Opportunity on those outcrops, we found evidence for clay minerals, and when we backed out the chemistry of those materials, they would have formed in mildly acidic at best waters and a little bit salty, but not much. And those are the kinds of waters that would have been habitable back a long time ago on Mars.
NASA has found evidence of a habitable environment on Mars before. The Curiosity rover, which is studying the Mars surface 5,300 miles away from Opportunity, found clay minerals that formed in relatively mild water conditions last year. But those materials were found in rocks that are younger than the more than 4 billion-year-old rocks that Opportunity examined, scientists say. All this suggests that Mars, a planet that's 4.65 billion years old, went through 3 distinct periods. The first was likely warm and wet, as Opportunity's latest discovery shows. The latest discoveries by the Opportunity rover add new insights into the history of water on Mars and reveal more favorable conditions for microbial life than any previous evidence collected by the rover.
Quoting from the NASA report, Curiosity has shown that the Gale crater was habitable around 3.5 billion years ago. It's a large swath of that planet, I should point out, with conditions comparable to those on early Earth where life evolved. They go on to say the question of whether life might have originated or even existed on Mars is a lot more opportune now that we know that organic molecules were present on its surface at that time. Other scientists pouncing on that said, maybe we were not alone. Maybe we are not alone.
And now that we know ancient Mars was habitable, did life arise there? This small meteorite from Mars was found in Antarctica in the 1980s. After being studied by scientists, they announced in 1996 that fossilized microbes from Mars were found in the meteorite. If life did develop on Mars, is there any evidence for intelligent life?
What NASA saw as an amusing fluke others saw as evidence of a Martian civilization capable of engineering the largest sculpture in the universe.
The face on Mars became an iconic figure. Many people claimed, by God, that is a face, and therefore, if a face a mile across, it proves A, that an intelligent civilization exists, and B, their faces look a lot like our faces.
The official explanation was that the face was produced by a trick of light and shadow. To test that theory, independent image enhancement engineer Dr. Mark Carlotto built a computer model showing the face under different lighting conditions.
What these results showed was that the facial features, instead of disappearing, actually persisted over a very wide range of conditions. And this suggested to me that it was not an optical illusion.
Additional pictures from the area around the face, a region known as Cydonia, were offered as further proof that the face was a Martian engineering model. The collection of pyramidal shapes became known as the Cydonian Complex.
This suggested the possibility that there was a bigger picture here, not just an isolated formation that happened to look like a humanoid face, but a set of objects nearby that may have been a place where the people who built the face could have lived.
Two years after the Viking mission, two computer engineers under contract to NASA noticed the face in a journal and began to dig through the original Viking photographs.
I did not think that it was really there because it looked too perfect like a face. I went to the National Space Science Data Center, and after doing a search, I found the picture right there in front of me and labeled head, and it was the picture of the face in Cydonia. So there was no mistaking that NASA had identified this picture as resembling the human form of a face.
Using a sophisticated computer technique to analyze the photographs, DiPietro and his partner Gregory Molinar put the face under minute scrutiny.
After doing our enhancing techniques, we were able to bring out details that were much greater than the raw pictures that we had. Within the eye cavity of the feature, there appeared to be what looks like an eyeball.
Interestingly, DiPietro and Molinar found a second photograph, taken at a different time, which seemed to verify that the face looked exactly the same, regardless of the light or the camera angle.
After searching the files, we found that there was a picture made 35 days later, and not only did it confirm that the object was still there, but there was more detail to be seen.
I was very impressed because they had gone to the trouble of finding two photographs of the face, not just one. And I remember particularly being impressed by the fact that they appeared to have found what looked like an eyeball. You can see a dark depression in the middle of the eye socket on both pictures, clearly visible.
Another computer scientist working independently used a different technique of photographic enhancement based on shadow depth. He found a detail in his copy of the Viking photos that the others had missed. Teeth. In addition to finding details on the first face, DiPietro and Molinar also found another face-like formation on Mars, thousands of miles away from the first face on the other side of the planet. His measurements were extremely similar to the Cydonia face.
Waterford, Virginia, 2017. Cydonia Institute researcher George Haas is combing through satellite images of Mars when he spies a discernible shape. It appears to be the image of another face. Unlike the original so-called face on Mars, discovered in 1976, this face appears in profile, similar to that of the Badlands Guardian.
So in this area called Utopia, in a huge impact crater, is the profiled face that has a beard, a mustache, and he's wearing a helmet that has an avian headdress. When the bearded profile on Mars is compared to the Badlands Guardian, we see the same type of profile, Both incorporate avian iconography. One has a headdress of feathers. The other one is wearing a headdress that incorporates an entire bird. I think the culture that produced these formations on Mars had a direct relationship to the human race.
And that is why we have similar structures on Mars and on planet Earth.
So with the discovery of the face on Mars, is it possible that it's acting as a clue? It's telling us that somewhere here is evidence of a lost civilization that existed on the red planet perhaps millions of years ago. That's a very tantalizing possibility, and it's one that I know that every scientist going to Mars wants to answer.
Visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there?
1998. The Mars Global Surveyor snaps photos of what appears to be a monolith on Phobos, one of the 2 moons that orbit the planet Mars.
On the moon of Mars, Phobos, there's a very, very interesting obelisk or monolith there. They call it the Phobos monolith. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, they made a really big deal out of this and basically claimed that it was artificial. And when we got there and studied it, it would change everything in terms of how we looked at our history.
Is it really possible there is an obelisk on a moon of Mars? One that is not a natural occurrence, but was, in fact, put there by otherworldly beings.
Images seen here were taken by the Mars Orbiter camera on board the Mars Global Surveyor. Their seemingly shiny, transparent, and tubular appearance has earned them the nickname of the glass tubes of Mars. They have also been dubbed the glass worms of Mars due to their ribbed appearance. No one knows exactly what they are, whether natural or synthetic, organic or inorganic. What we do know is that these structures are massive. Some of the tubes are estimated to be roughly a mile, or 1.6 kilometers long, and 600 feet, or roughly 183 meters wide. Since their discovery, many have tried to make sense of these strange Martian formations. In his book, The Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever, author and speaker Richard C. Hoagland offers one possible explanation for these structures.
Artifact. This mile-long, several hundred-foot wide structure with translucent exterior, a brilliant sun glint, and evenly spaced ribs that looks for all the world like an artificially constructed glass tunnel, which some have termed, like Arthur Clarke, a glass worm on the surface of a planet where it has, again, no business being. We have over a mile-long, curvilinear, convex structure with these extraordinary ribs that appear to be some kind of structural support. And right in the middle, there's a brilliant sun glint and a darker shadow, indicating in the model that this is a constructed object, that maybe it's a transportation tube. And this little thing, which actually is several hundred feet wide on the scale of the photograph, is perhaps a car, trapped in the middle of the tube when whatever disaster hit Mars and broke the tube at this point hit the planet. It's sometimes hard to gauge what's going on Mars from a two-dimensional photograph, so what we did was go to one of our Enterprise mission colleagues, Chris Joseph, and ask him to submit this image to a shape from shading algorithm. What that allows us to do is to recreate a three-dimensional construction of the two-dimensional form. And what we clearly see is an undulating glass-like tunnel with a sharp break at the position of the car, continuing on down the valley, as one would expect of a greatly eroded ancient artificial structure on the planet Mars. Because this is such a controversial discovery, what we did was what you do in any science, go to another opinion. So we got Kinsia and Fred Torres to generate a moving animated diagram of the same structure using the same shape from shading algorithm. And what you see here is a pan around this little valley and then the tube. And if you look carefully over here, you can see that there's a definite 3D structure to this object with regular spaced ribbing high above the valley floor. Whatever these are, they are not sand dunes. They appear to be structural components of a tube. And as we continue to pan down this valley, which is created by some unknown geological process long after this tube was ever built, you can see that these ribs are on the edges of the valley, not along the floor, something again that sand dunes just don't do. So what we seem to be seeing is the most extraordinary Mars surveyor find, namely a huge work of megalithic engineering lying on an ancient Martian plain.
Quite interesting. But is there any evidence for current life on Mars?
In 2012, the Curiosity rover landed on Mars's Gale crater. It was the most ambitious Mars mission flown by NASA to date.
Touchdown confirmed. Proceed on Mars.
One of its objectives was to gather data that will help scientists determine what is needed to make the planet more habitable for human exploration. In June 2018, scientist and aerospace engineer Dr. Travis Taylor traveled to Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. There, he met with NASA Exploration Mission scientist Dr. Elizabeth Rampey. Dr. Rampey analyzes data obtained by the Mars Curiosity rover, which 6 years into its mission is sending back some of its most extraordinary findings yet.
So there was very late-breaking news recently from the Curiosity rover, and some interesting information came out of the Sample Analysis at Mars, or SAM instrument.
Okay.
So SAM can measure gases in the atmosphere, and it can also measure gases that are evolved from samples. So basically, we drill a rock, deliver that powder to the instrument, and then that instrument heats up the sample and measures the gases that are coming off.
Whatever outgasses, it can tell you what that is, right?
Exactly. So a big piece of information from the atmosphere is that we've been tracking methane over the last few Martian years, and what we see is that there is a cycle to it where it spikes late summer, early autumn, and then dips again.
Wow.
Yeah, so the big question is why is that happening?
So that could possibly be due to an organic material, right? Or a biological source.
Exactly.
Meaning
So
life.
that's right. I know. So huge.
Wow.
It's not the only hypothesis out there.
Sure.
But, you know, there is the possibility that there is extant life on Mars that is creating this methane.
Wow. The fact that NASA has now released information that they've measured a cycle of methane that goes up in the summer and down in the winter, it sounds very similar to how biological processes create methane here on Earth. That could be evidence that there's life right now on Mars.
Methane is compelling, but these NASA photos of both trees and lakes are amazing. can judge for yourself, but supposedly NASA has photos of animal life too.
Remote sensing equipment, environmental monitoring instruments, but should NASA have equipped Curiosity with a mousetrap too? The Mars rover's mast camera has revealed what appears to be a rat on the surface of the red planet. Taken in September of last year in the Rock Nest site, the photograph led a blogger to note, quote, "looks similar to a squirrel camouflaged in the stones and sand by its colors." Hey, who doesn't love squirrels, right?
Could intelligent life exist on Mars right now?
Take a look at this picture of Mars. That light on the right side of the photo is creating quite a stir online, with some speculating the possibility of life on the red planet. NASA's Curiosity rover took the picture, and a NASA scientist tweeted the spot is probably just a cosmic ray. Curiosity captured a similar photo on Mars' horizon back in 2014, but it was said to just be the sun reflecting off the rocky surface. Right. That's cover. That's just their cover.
Even the reporter smells a cover-up. If they are there, how do they feel about our explorations of Mars?
This is the story of the Phobos incident. The Russian Space Agency started work on a new pair of unmanned space probes using a new design, one that would replace their older models, which had seen use in the Venera planetary missions since 1975. These new probes were called Phobos 1 and Phobos 2, as they were created to be sent into Mars orbit and interact with Mars' moon, Phobos, and they were highly technologically advanced for their time. Among many sensors and instruments aboard Phobos 1 and 2 were X-ray and gamma-ray spectrometers, magnetometers and magnetic susceptibility sensors, temperature sensors, tiltometers, seismometers, radiation detectors, a DAS lander, and the VST-TV imaging system that would eventually broadcast one of the most perplexing and incredible images ever to be observed by a spacecraft. Then, in January 1989, Phobos 2 entered Mars orbit. Curious shapes littered the surface, observed by the optical imaging cameras aboard Phobos 2. More curious, however, were the infrared signatures, which seemed to suggest something strange. Many agreed that the infrared signatures bore resemblance to those found in cities on Earth. However, they appeared to be generated beneath the surface of Mars. The city-like pattern is 60 kilometers wide and could be easily mistaken for an aerial view of Los Angeles. Dr. John Becklake of the London Science Museum said of the inexplicable infrared signature, "The images were certainly unsettling, something that was only compounded upon by the fact that Phobos 2 didn't transmit any more images until 24 days later. Commonly, these images are referred to as shadows. These images seem to show large shadows on the surface of Mars. They are observable in both optical and infrared, and you can observe features of Mars through them. The shadow has an iconic shape, which stretches close to 300 kilometers across the Martian surface. These shadow images generated so many more questions, but they would be the last images to be released from the Phobos program for a period of about 3 years, because on March 28, 1989, Phobos 2 failed. There were whispers that it had detected something strange just before going completely silent. March 31, 1989, headlines from Moscow stated that Phobos 2 captured strange photos of Mars before losing contact with its base. Speculation ran wild as whispers from the scientific community told of an alien vessel over 20 kilometers long. Skeptics turned their noses up and dismissed these claims as hearsay, no matter how many scientists came out to describe the images, which were not yet made public. However, in December of 1991, Marina Popovich, an Air Force colonel involved in the RSA, held a press conference at the Russian consulate in San Francisco. There, she would reveal to the world the final image taken by Phobos 2 before its failure 3 years earlier. What Marina would reveal would shake the public. To many, it is still the most damning evidence supporting intelligent life outside of Earth. The world looked on with slack jaws when she held up this still depicting Phobos and something in the foreground, something that shouldn't have been there. It was a very long, flat shape, measured to be over 20 kilometers long, and it appeared to be some sort of craft. The final image taken by Phobos 2 was confirmed by several optical cameras and the infrared camera. It was not an error. It was not an image artifact. What you were seeing, Marina described to be an unidentified flying object approaching Phobos 2. The timing of this image suggested that whatever this UFO was, it may have somehow shut down or destroyed the remaining Phobos probe. In the coming months after the image of the mysterious craft was revealed, many scientists collaborated over the shadow images, now given shocking context as the final images from Phobos 2 revealed a possible source of the shadows. Through that collaborative effort, it was learned that the shadows had been moving as the images were taken. It would appear that Phobos 2 had seen its unidentified flying stalker's shadow just before its cameras turned to face the anomaly directly in the moments before the probe went dark.
In my opinion, I believe it is quite obvious that Mars was flourishing with life billions of years in the past. And it seems the evidence for current life on Mars is very convincing. So I am certain, once we have a manned mission to Mars, extraterrestrial life will be confirmed.